Wow, it's been another week. So these Tuesdays just seem to be flying by. And I was just thinking about it, next Tuesday's in November. So that's crazy. Welcome to Woodall Hills out Campground Magazine's Outdoor Hospitality Update. And my co-host is Mike Gast. Say hi, Mike. I see your RV
Hello.
still in the same place. So
Yeah, that guy just won't leave. The
and then
monthly.
Our guest today is Scott Bahr. Scott, I think we'll just let you kind of introduce yourself a little bit and what you kind of do in the industry, I guess.
All right. So I'm a market researcher. I've been working in market research in hospitality and outdoor hospitality for a good 20 years. I've been working in market research for longer than that. And I've been working with folks in the industry at some level, whether it is through my relationships at KOA, as most people are aware of, as well as with those serving the RV industry as well, from suppliers to manufacturers, as well as RVIA too. So I've worked in the industry for quite a while. I try to hit on all sectors, and I also do other work in outdoor recreation as well. So it's the area I like to focus on the most. I transferred over from healthcare many years ago now, and this is a much better fit for me. Something I enjoy a lot more
So
than
Scott, you
healthcare.
and I have known each other, before you were gray and I still had hair. So it's been a long time. We sort of worked together to help create the KOA's Campgrounds America's North America Camper Report back in 2014. And before that, there really wasn't much going on out there as far as tracking camper trends and camper habits and camper desires. Where did that desire for data come from all of a sudden?
Um, I think it came from KOA internally. I would say primarily, where we used to have those conversations, as you probably recall too, where people would ask, "Well, how many people are actually camping?" And so we would go look, and it's like, "Well, we don't know. How many people are camping in RVs? How many people are camping in tents? All these questions." And once it started, it just created some momentum. It's like, okay, we have to do this. And the first time we ever did anything was we just wanted to know how many campers were out there. And we ran just a quick incidence poll through one of the major polling organizations just to ask that question and get the basic demographics. So that was in 2012, by the way. We didn't, the thing obviously didn't get rolling for a couple more years until after that. But yeah, it came from internal. KOA was an organization that was using data internally a lot up to that point in time. And then, as you know, it became something that the industry itself could use this information. And we all get better at the same time kind of idea, and kind of put that information out there for everyone to consume.
I know it was something that we saw the value of very quickly at KOA and decided very early on to share it with the rest of the industry because at the time, Jim Rogers, the CEO, felt that it was a real opportunity to lift all boats in the RV
Mm-hmm.
industry, lift all RVs in the RV industry. If everybody had the same data and were reacting to it the same way, he knew that we could progress the industry really quickly. What makes we always made a lot of effort to define what you did as a scientific research. What makes the research scientific?
Well, it's all quasi-scientific anyway, but that's the first thing they taught me in graduate school. So, but no, the idea that you put as much science behind it as you can, that is reasonable and doable, short of going door to door and asking people questions. So, what we do is we work with other organizations that allow us to access people, campers, RVers, all those folks in a way that is it adheres to sound theory, at least, in terms of, we access people randomly. We pick a certain amount. the pool of people we pick from is balanced to the overall population, so that we don't have any bias in there. So, for example, if we just went out and said, well, let's do a survey of people who we know are campers. Well, there's no way we're going to know from that whether that group is actually representative of campers. And two, it's never going to allow us to estimate what the incidence of camping is overall. So we need to adhere to some of those. And so for example, the samples that we use are balanced to the population overall. And that just means that the key demographics that we see, for example, in census figures, are used to say that the pool of people we're choosing in our work is representative of the overall U.S. population or Canadian population, so that we're going to pull people from that pool, and it's going to be representative of the overall population. Back in the day, not to get too nostalgic here, but back in the day, it was when everything was done by phone. It was a thing called random digit dialing, where we'd have these dialers, and they would dial people's homes randomly using the prefix and so on. That was also when people had landlines, and they were geo-based and all those things. So by the way, I think some of the problems you see in national polling are due to the fact that many of those organizations are still using that kind of antiquated approach.
So anyway, all this data became very key to, I know, KOA's operation and a lot of other folks, that there was a great desire to know what was coming from that North American Camping Report every year. Mm-hmm. So I know that some large companies were using the data that was being collected to make decisions. I know that, and we've seen the pandemic kind of turn everything on its head. So I'll ask you, did you see all this coming?
No. In a word, no. I would love to be able to say, oh yeah, I was right there. Because it was such a moving target at the time, and things happened so fast. No, we didn't, because we were just uncertain whether people would still want to actually go out and do these things and gather. And in hindsight, one of the things we do know is that people are very emotionally tied to camping and the outdoors, and that they're going to find a way. And that's what happened. And so, again, I wish I could say that I knew this was going to happen. The other part of that equation, though, was all the new people who came in. I think the camping market overall, camping sector, was set up for this to happen with RV availability, glamping, people wanting to, it was an easy jump for people to go from staying at a resort to staying at a glamping resort. They don't need gear. You can buy an RV and you can be on the road almost immediately, taking your clothes with you. So some of those barriers that we would see in the past were taken away, and people has, again, that strong desire to get out, to vacation, to travel. So we pulled in a lot of those leisure travelers who normally wouldn't have camped as well.
Yeah. I guess, at Woodall's, we see studies almost all the time from different various travel groups, companies. Obviously, the KOA one is a pretty big one. The National Association of RV Parks and Campgrounds has one that they release from campground owners, their Trends and Insights report. I guess, what's the difference between something like what KOA and ARVIC does, and maybe some of these companies when they release a survey or something, the results of a survey that they did? Is there a difference between those? What?
There are some key differences, and one of the things that we do in our research is we cast a very wide net. We define camping so that when we invite people to participate, we define it for them. We don't just say, "Did you camp?" Because one of the things we knew and Mike, I think you were probably part of this conversation too, is how do people define camping? And so we sat around the table and came up with the definition of what is camping, so that instead of the person self-determining whether or not they camp, we're going to define that for them. So again, we cast a wider net. We include people that probably would self-select out of some other surveys. And the other thing too is we do it at the household level. We don't just count heads. So some organizations will count heads, and that, I don't want to get really deep into this, and everybody will fall asleep and bail on this today. But at the household level, in our opinion, is a much better way of identifying, what the actual camping market is, so that you don't get duplicates per household and so on. So anyway, we're not counting heads. Some people do that. The other thing to keep in mind is that, again, is it population based? Because we, like I mentioned earlier, we go out to the general population, ask everyone, based on this definition, do you camp? So what I would, what I think people would could benefit from is just seeing what the approach to the work is. Who are they bringing in? For example, if someone does a survey, and it could be of just their customers or people who maybe visit a website or something like that. Not that I'm not criticizing that. But what I'm saying is that if in those results, what you're going to get is these results are representative of the people who visited that website or who are customers of that organization. So it kind of needs to be qualified a little bit when you're looking at the results, and that would be a caution, I would say, and not, again, those, because again, you're pulling from a pool of people that's different from the overall population, and I do believe casting that wider net is beneficial, because from there, then we can funnel people into the buckets where we think they should belong.
Okay.
Did I answer your question with that, or did I just ramble?
Yeah,
So-
no, I mean, I think it's important to look at the I can't say that word, methodology of how they do things. And because, some of these surveys that we get are really quick. Or if you look at the method, they're using like social media or some other way of garnering the results. We all get surveys in our emails or in our, when we're scrolling through pages online. Sometimes there will be a survey, and that's not. I wouldn't think that would be too extremely scientific. I don't know. So
yeah. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
So Scott, in 2020, in the spring of 2020, I know that I was still at KOA, and we were getting ready to launch out the 2020 North American Camping Report, and then COVID happened in March, and it kind of made it feel like we should just ball that one up and throw it away and start over, because everything kind of went out the window. And I know the KOA went back in and did some supplemental surveys to try to figure out what was going to happen next, because everything changed, and we didn't know what the rest of 2020 was going to look like. Did what KOA found out in that late spring, early summer time period, did that turn out to be true in 2020?
Yeah, I think so. We saw that. That there was going to be another big year for us. We saw that people were getting out a lot more often. That was going to happen. We saw what the barriers were. We saw the impact of vaccinations. We've also been doing this monthly survey as well, which we've used to supplement and complement the camping report and the spring work. And what we've been able to do is we've been able to track incidents and some of these other indicators based on what's been happening externally. Through like we were starting to see things really rebound, and that in terms of people crossover travel among campers, they were starting to venture out a little bit more into doing some other activities. And then when the Delta variant hit, we saw it revert right back to where it was So midsummer, by July, we started to see things back to where they were in March and April in people's attitudes and behaviors. So it really did track. With those external events are powerful, and how much they've impacted the industry, and it just continued to push people outside. We tracked crossover travel this year fairly extensively, and we saw that dwindle a lot. The optimism for people to whether it was go on a cruise or stay at a resort was pretty high in early summer, in April, May, and then it dropped way off by mid to the end of the summer. So yeah, it tracked pretty good. We I think where we were, I think it pretty much hit where we thought it would. A lot of consumers are still, uncertain. There's still some uncertainty out there. There's a lot of people. Last month we looked at snowbirding, and there's some still uncertainty there. A lot of people are just like, I don't know. Do I go? Do I not go? And also, that. But then they, will there be places available when they get there? Staffing issues, stuff like that. We're starting to see some of that stuff pop up, whether it's staffing issues or finding a place to stay this winter. So all these factors are really, we've been tracking them right along. I feel pretty good about where things are at overall. I feel like we've been able to stay on top of things, and that was the advantage of doing this monthly survey this year. It was so that we could really be much more responsive to what's happening in the market. We still love the annual survey and report, and we're going to continue to do that. But this monthly effort really lets us have the pulse of what's going on out there. And I would invite anyone to check
a big part of the value of the research over the years is the trend. And I know that a lot of the big decisions were made based on the trending of things that we've been watching for 5 or 6 or 7 years. Did COVID just completely wipe the slate clean, and we have to kind of start over on industry trends?
For some of them, I think we might. Because we saw such a huge influx of people in 2020, 2021. People who normally don't camp. Those people who are like, I'm not going to camp, bugs, whatever, safety, security reasons, they get out. We know from that work too that there's a bit of a leaky bucket where there's a decent number of people who aren't going to continue. And we don't know when that's going to start. These are a lot of those leisure travelers, and they're creatures of habit, and they want to get back to their old habits, the places they would visit, the way they would travel, and the places they'd stay. So there's definitely that desire, but we did pick up a lot of people who will stay. And it's going to be interesting to see who it is that stays, because again, with such a large influx of a different demographic, just one example was we saw that in 2020 we had a lot more higher income households camping compared to past results. In the past results, household income was really steady, in fact, remarkably consistent. But this past year, we saw a real serious bump in the household income. So we drew in, again, I think that somewhat more affluent demographic that came out. They glamped, they bought RVs. It'll be interesting to see if they stick around. That I think a lot of them will, but we also saw a lot of people go camping who weren't really prepared, and they were taken out by people who really didn't prepare them to go out. So there's a decent amount of one and done, but again, it does stick with a certain amount of people. So, but yeah, Mike, to answer your question, it's going to be one of those things where 2020 and maybe 2021 are going to have an asterisk and say, this was a situation where we had a major event going on, and we saw things were different. I suspect that some of the trends that we saw before they'll kind of regress back to where they were before, on which we were growing before. So I think that growth will continue, but just not as aggressive as we saw.
So what's being asked in the RVIA research that you can't get anywhere else?
With RVIA, I can't give away too much. No, but no, with RVIA, we've done some travel intentions, and it's mostly among RVers. So it's a little bit more of a narrower audience, and looking at intentions to continue RVing, looking at new markets in terms of the new folks coming into RVing, and kind of looking at RV travel for within specific timeframes as well. So we do that's a lot of what we've been doing with RVIA is looking at that RVer, the new RVer especially. That's a group that's of a lot of interest to the industry, seeing what they're up to. Again, what's the staying power within that group. But yeah, it's looking at RV travel overall, whether it's RV owners, people who are renting peer-to-peer, or you're just using their RV to visit friends and relatives, whether it's over the summer or over the holidays, and staying in their RV because it's a better way to travel. And they bought one this last year, so they need to use it.
We had a question. Somebody emailed me a question. Robert Gilcash. That's a pretty good last name. He was just wondering, I know Arvik does some stuff on new developments, new builds. What's that look like? Have you done any work on that, Scott? I don't know if KOA, have you done anything for KOA on that end? He wanted to know if you guys were monitoring the amount of new developments, new builds since COVID, I guess.
I am not part of that measurement.
Okay.
I know that there's people out there looking at it right now as we speak. And it's something, I don't get involved in that area too much, just independently, just because of conflict of interest, because of my work with KOA. But I can tell you, I get calls almost every week from people who are wanting to, from venture capitalists, wanting information on being able to put in new developments and stuff, which so it's really, and by the way, in previous years I might get one or two of those calls a year, and now I get them several times a month.
He also had well, it's not really a follow-up question, it's a separate question, but I think in the KOA report you do mention online bookings, or maybe the people who use online to get reservations. Maybe I'm wrong, but he asked how much of the market is moving toward online only booking. Do you measure stuff like that? How many people reserve online, I guess?
We do measure that. It's not something I have off the top of my head. But yeah, we do measure that as part of our research.
And I can actually get the most recent KOA report, just in case somebody in the audience hasn't seen it, and we can put a link in the comments.
You might just want to put a link up, Ben, to koapressroom.com.
Yeah.
Because all the reports since 2014, I believe, are up there. All the archived reports, including the current one, as well as all the monthly reports are up there too. So that might be a really good thing for folks to have access to. So that's one of the things we're talking about. Scott, have you seen individual campgrounds or dealerships dip into research just on their own businesses? Are we coming down to research being that vital for an individual business?
I have worked with dealerships in particular. I don't work with individual campgrounds, again, because of my work with KOA, because of the conflict of interest there. But I have worked with dealerships, and they're very interested in looking at at what's going on with the market, specifically their markets. We do stuff especially surrounding dealerships, who's there, what's motivating them, what are the perceptions of the dealerships, and so on. So yeah, it's something, and I actually enjoy that work quite a bit too. They're always fun to work with. actually like working with salespeople. They're actually a wealth of information. They have so much contact with the consumer. It's great to include that perspective in whatever we do.
So with that in mind, what's the level of sophistication? How much has the level of sophistication changed over the last 8 years in the industry?
Oh, I think quite a bit. I mean, I've talked to people who say that they take the camping report and either they get hard copies of it and they hand them out to their teams. I've walked into campgrounds just to say hi to people, and I'll tell them what I do, and they'll hold up the camping report and say, "This is what we use." And I was like, "Oh, good, glad to see that." But yeah, the people are asking for more, and I've noticed also that they're not just asking for more; they're asking for better too, more more meaningful information, not just it's. And one of those things I always say in travel and tourism, what they like to do a lot of is count heads. How many people visit your state, kind of thing. So people are starting to demand information that's better than that. I don't want to say better. That was a value judgment, and I shouldn't have said that. That it's still valuable to know how many people are visiting your state, but there's this demand for information, like what drives the person there, how did they get here, how long did they stay, are they going to come back, again, what are their motivations, where are people at in that process, so again, by the way, and we were talking earlier about other sources of data. One of the things I always see ourselves separate from the kind of the travel tourism research sector, and that's one of the things that people should always pay attention to too, by the way, is many organizations in other leisure travel is they use criteria to allow people to be identified in their pool. For example, that many organizations use an income cutoff and so on. So we don't do that. So anyway, there's I guess, does that answer the question? I don't know if I did. I got sidetracked slightly. See what happens.
It's been interesting, since KOA started doing the report. I think just the shift in campground owners' minds. I think the reports really, and just not the KOA report. I mean, the ARVIC report and some of the other research and the RVIA work that's been done over the years. It shows the diversity of camping, increasing. And I think it's really opened the eyes of a lot of campground owners to some of the different types of people that go camping that maybe they hadn't thought about in the past, and the things that they're looking for. And I think that's really spurred improvement in the sector as well. It's one thing when you go to a conference and people are telling you this is happening, but when you see it in a study that's well done, it just opens up your eyes. Wow, this is a whole nationwide thing. This isn't just something I heard at a conference, I guess.
Yeah, again, that demand for information is something that we've seen increase over time, and I'd like to think that this the information that we put out there has been a big part of it.
So let's talk diversity just for a second. I know that it was a big part of the North American Camper Report over time, and we've kind of tracked Hispanic campers or African American campers and how that changed. Is there a danger as far as the recipients of that data to make generalizations about how people camp, or to ignore the differences culturally? I mean, there are those cultural differences that really make a difference sometimes. How do you treat the weight of that data when you say we are going to ask questions of Hispanic campers, and how do you avoid those generalizations about those cultural differences?
What the way I would advise anyone to use and to consume that information is, these are overall findings. this is kind of the umbrella that we see. But it is kind of the responsibility of whether it's the dealer, the park owner, the aftermarket his supplier, whomever, to have that the inquisitiveness and the relationship with the individuals to identify what they need at that level. Because I agree, Mike, if you start making too many broad generalizations, it's not going to fit everyone. But what it's telling people is this is where things are headed overall. Here are some things that you should identify, and if you're going to use it in your marketing and your promotions, it's all great stuff, because you're going to hit a wider part of these other audiences, these subgroups within the camping population. So that to me is the real value. But it also, again, for example, we've tracked and we know that among many Hispanic campers, they travel in larger groups. But what's been happening over time is that's decreasing. The group size is decreasing, and that was happening before COVID even. So to just assume that all Hispanic campers are going to show up and stay in a really large group, well, that's an assumption you probably shouldn't make. But if you live in an area where you want to attract that Hispanic camper, or you have a lot of Hispanic campers coming to your campground, maybe you should allow for make sure your group facilities are prepared to accommodate some larger groups. So that to me is the utility of it. But again, the person on the ground needs to also address the individuals and their situation.
So one of the things I think that's held true since I've been in the business for the last 2 decades is that it doesn't matter culturally what group you're in or age groups. It's typically the woman in the family that's making the decision. Do you take any special effort to balance that out, or make sure that you're talking to the decision maker in the family?
Yes, we do. We do try to make sure that we identify the person who makes the decisions about their travel. It's the same thing in healthcare too, by the way. The men always like to think they're making the decisions, but they don't really. So,
well, they may get to decide what kind of hitch they put on their truck, but they probably don't get to decide what floor plan we're going to have in our trailer.
Get to make some gear decisions. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So the grill, the outdoor cooking stuff. But yeah, other than that, yeah.
So there's our gross generalization for the day.
Absolutely. But it's kind of true.
Just for the record, I do the trip planning in my house. So if you want to talk to me, Scott, I can help with the next.
There's
study.
A classic example of a guy that thinks he does, Scott.
Right. Yeah. Right. There's someone in the household who's shaking their head vigorously.
I guess from a practical standpoint, I think, when I look at the KOA report, there's a lot of stuff in there I think park owners could use just to formulate, ideas for what they want to add to their parks and stuff, or how to improve their parks, I guess. Like the Wi-Fi, you guys do a lot of work on Wi-Fi and different things too, right?
We're now in the era of the comfort camper. People want comfort and convenience. And again, this is one of those things that we identified many, many years ago when we did research at the individual campground level at KOA, was one of the biggest barriers to camping. And one of the reasons that a lot of people actually stay at, for example, KOAs or other private campgrounds is the idea of safety and security. If you take a person who's relatively new to the outdoors, that idea is really strong. Having shelter of some kind other than the tent is big. Thus, glamping, other on-site accommodations, whether it's a yurt, whether a glamping tent or cabins, those are big. Those are big for new campers. So yeah, the idea that those are all in that report. What it takes is to sit down and kind of read through that and apply the results to their situation. It's like, what can we add? What can we enhance? What are the things that people are looking for? For example, you just having a clean, well manicured campground, but your bathrooms better be really clean too. So we know that that's huge. We've known that for a long time, and it shows up in that report too. It's if you want to take care of one thing on your campground, it should be your bathrooms. It's that important. But yeah, the idea that people are seeking a shelter. They want safety, security, whether even safety lighting. That it gets them away from bugs too, which for some people, especially newer campers, it's a real hindrance to their experience. So it's there's a lot of information. If the person sits down, reads through it, and they can always ask. They can always ask me too if they have a question. I answer a lot of questions throughout the year from individuals who have questions about anything that's in the report.
How looking, are there any, what are you looking, what are some of the trends maybe you're looking at for the future? I guess, what are some things that are popping up that are maybe new that maybe we haven't talked about in years past?
One of the things that I think about a lot is the idea of the consumer, the consumer, the camper, who isn't locked in to one type of experience. When I feel like we're entering an era where people are less likely to want to do the same thing all the time, especially some of the younger generations. It's like they, which I believe is driving some of the trends toward peer-to-peer rentals with RVs, the growth in overlanding. It's a new and different type of experience, but people dipping their toes into all these different experiences. In general, I feel like people are bored in general, and they want something new. They want something different to do, especially now. The last couple of years have been really stressful for a lot of people, and they want to try new things. So that's kind of where I'm at right now, is kind of looking at what is the look ahead with these campers, these newer campers, these people who started in the last couple of years. Where are they now? Where are they headed? I feel like some people, for example, we know that a lot of people were looking at RVing in the future, especially younger people. They were thinking, yeah, maybe sometime in the future I'll get an RV. I think that got pushed ahead for a lot of people. They did it sooner than they were going to, that they had originally planned to. So some of the what is the lasting impact of COVID on camping? And and again, these experiences, where's that headed? Where are people headed to, and how? Those would be really interesting.
One of the things that I think is a mega trend, and I'm sure KOA is looking at it in future surveys, is the advent of e-vehicles. I know, being involved in the KOA directory over the years, one of the things that's being added to the directory listings now are whether or not the campground can handle charging e-vehicles, because they're starting to show up on campgrounds in a big way, and campgrounds that have 50 amp coverage are able to slowly charge electric vehicles. So they've really become a way for people with electric vehicles to travel, and we're probably still a few years away from any mass production of an electric RV, but they're certainly coming. So that's a trend I think that's coming, and it's going to be a real sea change for the campground operators who have to do a lot of infrastructure there. There's a lot of investment that has to be done, almost to probably even worse than or akin to that change from 30 amp to 50 amp, when they had to get that level of power in order to power the bigger RVs. Now here comes an electric vehicle charging, which they prefer, of course, to have the rapid charge stations, which can get expensive in a hurry. But there's a grid being built out, and the campgrounds are a part of that now, as far as how do people travel across country with an electric vehicle that if they're lucky, they can get 400 miles between charges on. So campgrounds are going to play a part in that, and I'm sure that KOA and others are looking at what the trending is going to be on that.
Sure. We're looking at sustainable practices as well. What's the look ahead on that, which the EVs are part of that array. Looking at what's going to really drive the camper in the future. What are they looking for at the campground level? What are the services and amenities? And one of the things that I think will be interesting is to see. I feel like we're on the cusp of some innovation, some things that we can't think of, and that people are going to start putting out there. I'm really interested, especially because of where I live. We're starting to see, I call them boutique campgrounds, just smaller campgrounds with just a few sites, but they might be specialty sites. Like they might have an RV, they might have a yurt, they might have a tree house, a couple tent sites, or maybe 10 sites maximum. But we're starting to see those pop up a little bit, and also just I'm seeing a lot more people rental properties and so on. So again, those are some of the things that are happening. But yeah, the EV stuff, Mike, absolutely. We're seeing it here in our little area in Western Maine, where one of the gas stations in town has a whole setup for charging electric vehicles. Both of the ski resorts here have. One of them has a solar array for charging EVs, and the other one just has regular stations. We're also seeing the promotion of winter camping. The ski resorts are doing it, and some of the campgrounds are thinking of keeping some of their sites open during the winter because there seems to be a desire for people to camp in their RVs, especially during the winter. But I know a lot of people who last year, for the first time ever, went out winter camping in a tent, out in the snow here in Maine. So it's, these are some of those trends. I think that they're really exciting, and I see it, again, as fitting into that idea of people wanting, new, varied experiences in their camping.
And one of the things that's really been a bone of contention, I know, in RV travel that I write for, is camper dissatisfaction with their ability to find a site within a timely manner. I mean, they're being forced now to book their travel a year and a half out. Some of them are trying boondocking in various ways. Boondocking not just in a Walmart parking lot, but getting very creative and going off road a little bit, into the public lands in order to find affordable places to camp. And it's not so much about the affordability; it's just the fact they can't get into a commercial campground anymore. And it's spawned things like Harvest Host, which is which where people will go and stay at a winery, for instance, in the parking lot, and basically dry camp, or maybe have a 50 amp outlet to plug into. And they get to stay there for nothing in exchange for going in and buying a couple bottles of wine before they leave. So it's getting very innovative, and people are finding ways to still do the lifestyle, but it's not just commercial camping or state and national parks anymore.
Yeah, I feel like the market is adjusting. I feel like it was starting to before all this, and now it's really getting ramped up. My sister is a Harvest Host, by the way. So, yeah,
you're gonna get disqualified from working in the campground industry.
I didn't tell you where she is, so she's not in Maine. But anyway, yeah, those types of things, those types of there's a lot of farms where in the area I live, they're doing that, or like Hip Camp. They're listing because they have property people can come stay at, and there's anyway, those are the things that overflow, and people are going to seek that more and more as they have those difficulties finding a spot, because there's still that idea that some people still want to go out and just explore and not make all their plans in advance. They want to land somewhere and just do it spontaneously.
We got another email from Robert Gilcash, who's the director of property development for Advanced Outdoor Solutions, and that's like a property management company. But he mentioned the bathrooms and the Wi-Fi as being number one and number two, like we had mentioned earlier. And then he mentioned, their surveys to guests, they want experiential offerings, which I think we talked about. They're looking for unique things, especially like millennials. And then he also mentioned that when they're designing new parks, they're putting in charging stations, typically 3 to 4 of them near the main office area. So
Mhm.
I just think the EV discussion is really interesting. I don't think we've hardly won a show without mentioning EVs. And, when we look like a year ago or maybe 2 years ago, nobody was really talking about EVs in the camping sector. And it's amazing how quickly it's turned around. And now, when you look at the new F-150 that they're creating and some of these unique ideas these people are creating as far as trying to extend towing capacity and different things, it's just amazing how quickly, EVs are going to be showing up at the campgrounds. And I mean, the Teslas are already showing up in some areas. So it's just incredible. So,
Hey, Hertz just purchased 100,000 Teslas, so
yeah.
you're going to see them in the rental fleets, which also is going to impact camping because you can rent one in a larger city airport and take off to campgrounds, and if you can get a charge there, then you're in business.
Well, before we get going, here you go, Scott. Celestial Daniel said, that is quite an extraordinary report. I think she looked at the KOA link we had. So there you
Oh,
go. You
good,
got some
good.
kudos.
Well,
So
thank you, Celeste.
you're doing a good job. But I mean, I thought it was a good discussion. It's probably about time to wrap this thing up. Thanks, Scott, for joining us. And you're always really good. I mean, it's great to hear you talk about these studies. So,
That's what I do. I enjoy. I mean, if you want me to, I can talk about this for a couple more hours. We'll just keep it rolling. And
Well, good.
well,
Scott, it was really good. It was really good to see you again. I haven't seen you in a couple of years now, I think. So it was.
I
It was
know,
really,
I know.
really good to see your face.
well, you got to
Well,
get back to the mainland, Mike. You don't see
I'm not
people in
coming
Hawaii.
back. The
You're
heck
not
with it.
coming back.
Why would I do
So,
that?
next week we're going to be talking about work campers, some of the issues people are facing on the work camper front, what that market looks like. I know we have one guest lined up. Kama Humphrey should be joining us from Campgrounds of America. She operates their work camper program, and then we're also going to be working to get a campground owner on here just to talk about the demands of the work camper industry right now. I mean, it's tough to get work campers. At least last year it was. They were finding really high paying positions, and with the employment situation the way it is, a lot of um, campground owners are really struggling to find employees. So it should be a good discussion on work campers. So and then we go into our conference coverage, which should be great too the next couple weeks. So if we're getting into conferences, I can't believe it's November already. So almost. So everyone have a great Halloween if you're going trick or treating, and thanks again, Scott, for joining us. So
thank you. Thanks. It was
Everybody
great
be safe
speaking
out
with
there.
you both. Take care.
Bye.